Hello, welcome to the Bible study. Glad to have you. We're going to have a doozy of a lesson today. It's one of my favorite parts of Genesis because God's going to repeat over and over and over again something that He wants from us as well as from Noah. And we're going to look at the Noah story from beginning to end. Okay. What we're going to do is you're going to circle certain words that I'm going to let you know as we read through each of these columns. And you're going to need to come to the conclusion as to what God is doing and why He's doing it. So we'll begin with the story in chapter 6, verse 17. And God is speaking. For behold, I will bring a flood of waters upon the earth. I want you to circle upon the earth. You probably already have it in bold print, so you really don't have to circle at this time. To destroy all flesh, which is the breath of life under heaven. Everything that is on the earth shall die. But I will establish my covenant with you, and you shall come. And the word come is in Hebrew, bo. Yeah, very simple. Come or bo. It's a command. You shall come, bo, into the ark. And then, so you circle that. Bo, come into the ark. And then you're going to circle the next few words as separate. You, your sons, your wife, and your sons' wives with you. So circle that. And of every living thing of all flesh, you shall bring 2 of every sort into the ark to keep them alive with you. They shall be male and female. Of the birds according to their kinds, and of the animals according to their kinds. Of every creeping thing of the ground according to its kind, 2 of every sort shall come in to you to keep them alive. Also take with you every sort of food that is eaten, and store it up. It shall serve as food for you and for them. Noah did this. He did all that God commanded him. So we have these things in bold print in our first column. But I want you to note that as we read through the second column, the important items are said again. It's repeated. The story will be repeated a second time. So let's see. In chapter 7, verse 1, the second column, then Yahweh said to Noah, come. Another command, to come, bo, into the ark. So now what you're going to do, and I'm only going to tell you this once, is you're going to see what words from the first column that are in bold print or circled by you that are also in the second column. So the first thing said is come as a command into the ark. And then circle, keep on circling the things that are in the first column. You and all your household. Now, it doesn't have to be the same exact words, but it can be the same idea. For I have seen that you are righteous before me in this generation. Take with you 7 pairs of all clean animals, the male and his mate, and a pair of the animals that are not clean, the male and his mate, and 7 pairs of the birds of the heavens, also male and female, to keep their offspring alive on the face of the earth. Okay, so um, they're to take 7 pairs of the clean animals, not just 1 pair. So we have to ask ourselves, why is God saying take 7 pairs of the clean animals? Verse 4, for in 7 days I will send rain on the earth 40 days and 40 nights, and every living thing that I have made I will blot out from the face of the ground. And Noah did all that Yahweh had commanded him. Noah was 600 years old when the flood of waters came upon the earth. So, did you circle the things that were in the first column? Well, if you haven't circled all of them, I'm going to give you time, a few seconds worth of time, and then if you need more time, you can pause it and circle all the things that were in the first column that also are in the second column, and we'll go over it. Okay, let's go over it. Well, in verse 1 of the second column, it says, come into the ark. And it also said that in the first column, verse 18, you shall come into the ark. 2 commands. And then it says, you and all your household. It doesn't say the exact words, but it means the same. You, your sons, your wife, and your sons' wives with you, right? And then in verse, in verse 2, it says, with you 7 pairs. Now, it didn't say the word pairs in the first column, but it did say 2 of every kind, which means the same. He's saying pairs. Only this time he's talking about clean and unclean. 7 pairs of clean animals, the male and his mate. And the male and his mate, a pair of animals that are not clean, the male and his mate. Now, remember, 7 pairs of the clean animals and 1 pair of the unclean animals. And we're questioning this. To keep their offspring, pairs, let's start with 3, verse 3, and 7 pairs of birds of the heavens, also male and female, to keep, and that's another one, male and female. We have that also in verse 19, the end of verse 19 in the first column. To keep their offspring alive on the face of all the earth. For in 7 days I will send rain on the earth, 40 days and 40 nights, and every living thing that I have made I will blot out from the face of the ground. And here's the last thing that you should have circled or draw a line to. Noah did all that Yahweh had commanded him. Just like in verse 22, Noah did all that God commanded him. So we have a second story, the same as the first story. A few additional items, but nothing contradictory, just a few additional items. Let's see what we can do with the third column. And verse 7, and Noah and his sons and his wife and his sons' wives with them. Again, you're going to be circling or draw a line between the second column and the third column so that you can see that we're having the story retold again. And Noah and his sons and his wife and his sons' wives with him came, into the ark to escape the waters of the flood. This time we have the word come or came, only this time he's enacting what God had commanded in the first two columns. He said, come, and again, come. So Noah came to escape the waters of the flood, of clean animals and of animals that are not clean, and of birds and of everything that creeps on the ground, two and two, or by twos. That means by twos. Male and female went into the ark with Noah, as God had commanded Noah. And after 7 days, the waters of the flood came upon the earth. In the 600th year of Noah's life, in the second month, on the 17th day of the month, on that day, all the fountains of the great deep burst forth, and the windows of heavens were open, and rain fell upon the earth. Remember, it had said that in verse 6 of the previous column, which I think I forgot to read. In verse 6 of the previous column, it says Noah was 600 years old when the flood of waters came upon the earth. Just as in the first column, it says in verse 17, upon the earth, a flood of waters upon the earth. And now we have it again here. Okay. If you didn't have enough time to circle, you can circle now or draw lines from one column to the next. I'll give you a few seconds, and if it's not long enough, put it on pause. Okay, let's look back. Here we go again. Noah and his sons and his wife and his sons' wives with him, just like he had said in column 2, you and all your household. That includes Noah and his sons and his wife and his sons' wives with him. Okay? The next thing is came, or into the ark. So in the first two columns, he said only it was in the command form. And he says again, only it's in the action form. They came into the ark to escape the waters of the flood, of clean animals and of animals that are not clean, and of birds. So animals and birds are said again. And then it says 2 and 2. And that means by twos. And it says male and female, just like it did in the previous two columns. Went into the ark with Noah as God had commanded Noah. Noah's obeying. And then we look at the bottom, verse 12, and rain fell upon the earth, just like in the first two columns. We had the story retold with additional elements to clarify things and to talk about the flood that does come upon the earth. Let's see the fourth column. On the very same day, Noah and his sons, Shem and Ham and Japheth, and Noah's wife, and the 3 wives of his sons. All this time, it's the whole household, just like the previous ones, only now he's going to give the names of his sons. So an additional item, but the same thing is being said. with them came into the ark bow. And this shows compliance to what God had commanded. He's obeying. And they and every beast, that's an animal. So you circle that one. It's an animal according to its kind, and all the livestock, another animal, according to their kind. And then go down to the end of that verse, and every bird. So we had the animals and the birds. And then in verse 15, they went into the ark with Noah, 2 and 2, or by twos, of all flesh in which there was the breath of life. And those that entered, male and female, of all flesh, went in as God had commanded him, that is Noah. And then Yahweh shut him in, and the flood continued for 40 days upon the earth. You see, everything that's being repeated. Yep, and there's repeated because they're retelling the story. And we say to ourselves, why does this story have to be repeated 4 times? So let's look and make sure about the fourth column. Noah and his sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and their wives and his wife. Then it says at the end of that verse, came into the ark. That's the same. Beasts and birds. And then 2 by 2 or by twos or pairs, whatever way he wants to say it, it's the same thing. Male and female, as God commanded him. And then down the bottom, upon the earth. Did you get those? Yep. So I figured the last time you probably catching on. So I didn't give you time to do it at the end. Okay. So each column is telling the same story with additional elements here and there concerning the flood or concerning what kinds of animals and birds and how many, years it is. But these additional items keep the story going, yet the story is repeated over and over again. So we have to ask why. And the why is simple. It's important. Whenever God repeats a word or a story, and he does so quite often, he repeats it. It's because it's important. Yes. That's a word I've been using since the first days of my teaching Bible studies close to 40 years ago. God uses repetition because it's important. So this story is important. Now, why is it important? That's the next step. So we have to start looking at it to see why it's important. And it's important because we are learning that Noah obeyed. Now, what's interesting is he obeys vertically and horizontally. Let me show you what I mean. In each thing, it says that in the first column, you shall come. That's the command. And then it tells us that Noah did it. Look at verse 22. Noah did this. He did all that God commanded him. So that's important. Noah did what God commanded him. In the second column, we see in verse 1, come. into the ark. And then down near the bottom in verse 5, it says, Noah did all that Yahweh commanded him. Column 3, it's teaching us again of Noah's obedience to God's command. And that is important to God because God had said Noah was a righteous man. What made him a righteous man? Noah did what God commanded him. Okay. And then it tells us in the third column, Noah and his sons and his wife and his sons' wives with him came into the ark. And therefore, in verse 9, it can tell us that Noah did as God had commanded him. Again. And in the last line, it tells us that Noah, and it talks about his sons and his sons' wives and his wife, they came into the ark just as God commanded him. And that we see down here in verse 16. And those that entered, male and female of all flesh, went in as God had commanded Noah. Right? Noah complied. Noah obeyed. Noah listened to God's words, and he obeyed. We are to listen to God's word. What word am I talking about? The Bible. That's how we hear God's word. And if we're not in God's word, we don't know. We won't gain the wisdom that we need to know what to do in our lives. We won't know what God has commanded us to do. He wants us in his word so that we will obey his word. Well, that's obedience vertically. In each column, Noah obeyed what God had said, and that is, he came. God said, come. He came. But how about horizontally? It tells us that too. So let's look at the first column. And it says to Noah in verse 18, but I will establish my covenant with you, and you shall come into the ark. Okay, that's the command. You shall come into the ark. In the second column, it tells us in verse 1, he said to Noah, come into the ark. That's the command. Come into the ark. But in the third column and the fourth column, here's where the obedience is horizontally across the four columns. So Noah and his family came into the ark. Into the ark. And again in the fourth column, it tells us the names of the sons, and that they, in verse, in verse 13, they came into the ark. First two columns is the command, come, come. The last two columns, they came into the ark. So, God is showing us 4 different times, horizontally and vertically. That Noah heard God's command and he did it. All that God had said. And that is such an important thing in this story. And that's why God tells it 4 times. But he just doesn't just tell it 4 times. He has bookends around it, which are very informative. First to make sure that I get this in. You heard about the clean animals, 7 sets of clean animals. Why are we given just 2 sets of unclean, or 1 set of unclean, and 7 sets of clean animals? 2 reasons. After the flood, God's going to open the floodgates for all kinds of food. Before the flood, it was the green plants. Remember that were created on the 3rd day and given to humans on the 6th day. God's going to say, I'm adding to it. You're going to be able to eat the animals now. And that's why we have roast beef today. Or steak. Or drumsticks. Whatever. Because God had given it to us for food. But it had to be in antiquity, in the time of Noah and Moses. Only clean animals could be eaten, not unclean. Therefore, if the clean animals are going to be eaten, oh my goodness, we need a whole lot more than just 2 of every kind. Because God gives plenty. He gives it so that it's abundant. So he makes sure there are 7 pairs of each of the clean animals so that they could eat it and have abundance. But there was also another reason for having 7 clean sets of animals. And that was because only the clean animals could be sacrificed, not unclean. Clean animals were sacrificed to God. And that's exactly what Noah did when he came off of the ark and all the animals came off. He got those clean animals and he did an offering to the Lord from the clean animals. Yes, not all the clean animals, but he gave an offering. So that's why we have the clean and unclean specified in 3 of our columns. Okay, but there's something else. Bookends around it. And let's see what... Oh, good. 2 more minutes. It says at the beginning, okay? For behold, in the 17th verse of the first column, for behold, I will bring a flood of waters upon the earth to destroy flesh, in which is the breath of life under heaven. And so under heaven, everything that is on the earth shall die. The story begins with judgment. Judgment. And the judgment is death. See, let's read it again because I want you to see. I think I have it underlined in yours. Yes, 17. Behold, I will bring a flood of waters, upon the earth, to destroy all flesh. B, in which is the breath of life. But look at the end. We have judgment at the beginning and death. But look at the end. It says in verse 15, So they went into the ark, Noah, and two of all flesh, and here's in which there was the breath of life. What's going on here? We have grace. There's going to be life because God is going to bring two of every kind, in which is the breath of life. Remember the bee in the first verse of the first column? The bee said, in which is the breath of life. And those that entered make male and female of all flesh. Here we are in the fourth column, the 16th verse. And those that entered male and female of all flesh went in as God commanded him, and Yahweh shut him in. And the flood continued upon 40 days upon the earth. Remember, that was our A in the 17th verse of column 1. So column earth has upon the earth in verse 17, followed by B, in which is the breath of life. And so that's judgment. He's going to destroy, isn't he? The judgment is death. But look at the grace. Two of every kind, in which there is the breath of life, and the flood of waters will come upon the earth. But God gives grace. He saves two of every kind, including humans, animals, and birds. God is such a gracious God. Yes, he judges. Yes, he gives grace. It begins with judgment, death. God will command a flood upon the earth in which all that have the breath of life will die. It ends with grace. That is life. God will command an ark made in which two of all who have the breath of life will live. God extends grace. That's a wonderful thing to know. Be obedient to God's command and learn what God's command is by reading his word.